to another episode of BoxTrick. I am your host, Matt Brady, known on the internet as Super Gains Bros, joined today by Jakejames Lugo. JJ, well, you're also known on the internet as Jakejames Lugo, but how
Well,
are you? Exactly, yeah. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. Thank you for having me again. I'm glad that we get to talk again. It's been a hot minute and stuff. There's been a lot of stuff, but yeah, I'm doing all right. I'm doing okay.
Yeah, good. Yeah. We interact a lot on TikTok. And I think that really there's not a lot of people actually on TikTok, at least in my feed. And I see a lot of gaming content in my feed. There's not really a lot of people who talk and I think really know sort of like the insides of the gaming industry itself. You definitely do a lot of that content, as well as movies and stuff like that. You're always doing movie reviews and stuff like that. So I thought you'd be a really good person to talk to about this, because I kind of want to do like an update on like the state of gaming. I always kind of like to do this around this point in the year to talk about like just where the video game industry is, as well as, we'll probably get a little bit into like, so the entertainment industry as well, since it's now kind of one thing at this point. But I kind of feel like this year, and I know Sony has come out and they've said it, that this is kind of a slow year for them. But man, I think with the combination of like Nintendo holding back, preparing for the Switch 2, Sony having a lot of games on the horizon, is this like the worst year in gaming in recent memory?
Straight up, no. Like,
no.
The thing is, a little bit of that, and it's not just you. I've seen other people talk about this from time to time. I think that's a little bit of hyperbole, because we're in kind of like a slower time. There's a couple points throughout a year whenever games are coming out that things tend to slow down. Usually it's in the summer or just coming off the summer when we're going into that fall season. And most of the time we'll get like our big games towards the beginning of the year, in the spring, in the fourth quarter of the year is when we get a lot of games. We just had a big game drop today, even on Game Pass and stuff. Call of Duty Black Ops 6 literally just came out today at the time we're recording this. But we've had other games that have been pretty decent over the course of the last couple of months and stuff. I mean, we just had the Until Dawn remake. We just had the Silent Hill 2 remake just come out not that long ago. We had a Zelda game drop on Nintendo Switch like not even a couple weeks ago. So there's games coming out. There's stuff to play. There's even like indie stuff and lesser known things that didn't get as much marketing or promotion as some of these other big franchises and stuff. But point is, there's still games to play, and there's still going to be a lot of chatter about some of the best games of the year come the time of the Game Awards when the year starts to wrap up into 2025.
Yeah, see, I guess the way I view it is I don't know, this year it does feel a little slow to me. I mean, obviously you're right. There has been big games, Dragon Ball Sparking Zero came out, and then you go back to earlier in the year, like Helldivers, I think sort of really came out as a big surprise. And I think the game, I will talk a little bit here in a bit or later about game of the year, which I think both of us are on the same page. That's what we've been saying, and commenting on in like TikTok lives and stuff like that, is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, because I really don't know if anything is gonna beat that in terms of.
I think there's one contender that came out recently that people are talking about it, like in that conversation. But me personally, I don't think it's going to be my game of the year by the time the year wraps up.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, we'll talk about that here in a bit. But yeah, I don't know. For me, I just feel like this year, I don't know what it is. And maybe it's just like more indie titles seem to be the thing. And we're seeing a lot of games come out and maybe have not as good reception. You look at something like a Star Wars Outlaws, I think that sort of struggled. I mean, Ubisoft said that it financially was disappointing for them. I mean, Square has even said that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth was it didn't really meet its expectations. And maybe it's just sort of like there's a lot of negativity online about the game industry as of late. But yeah, I guess for me, I am in the camp where I'm like, man, I feel like this year is a little bit of a letdown. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just the negativity is getting to me. Maybe it's an election season and everything's just negative.
There's a lot of things at work. Like, it really depends on what you're talking about, because if we're just talking about straight games, like game releases, this has been a great year, because you have to look at the entire year in its entirety. The beginning of the year, I feel like, was a little bit more top heavy. We got some big games that came out earlier this year within that January to about, I want to say May, June timeframe. Is when like some of the big games started to stop coming out. And so we started to pick up again towards now. We're going into the fourth quarter. We had Tekken 8. We had Helldivers 2. We had Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. We had Street Fighter 6. Like the list goes on. I mean, there's been games to play. So if we're talking strictly games, then yeah, I don't agree with that because there's stuff that's out there that we're still going to be talking about towards the end of the year. Now, if we're talking about instances in the industry, as far as like the state and the health of the industry, when we're talking about development, when we're talking about business stuff, when we're talking about just the overall vibes that we're getting from various sides of the games industry, it's been very hit or miss. And it's been very, again, ebbs and flows for a lot of reasons. There's a lot of layoffs that have been happening this year. Like you can't talk about 2024 without talking about the layoffs. And for better or worse, there's been some companies that had to make decisions about different things, letting go a lot of people. There's been a lot of teams that have been losing their jobs, or people that have just been removed from studios because either one, some of the games that they were working on, despite getting critical acclaim, were not getting financial success, or at least meeting the expectations that are expected of them by the time, they release their games and afterwards when it goes onto the market. At the same time, there's also been a lot of shifts for a lot of different companies. We've had companies like Bungie that have been going through a lot of changes, and a lot of different things been happening over there for many different reasons, not necessarily just on them. A lot of people blame it on management, and I understand that, but there's a bunch of different factors that are all compounding together to really mess things up. Look at Ubisoft now. Ubisoft's been going through some problems. Some of it, is their own creation, admittedly, for, again, many different reasons. They're also been dealing with, for the last couple of years, different entities that have been trying to get a little bit much more control over them. And that plays and that kind of drops down into a lot of other aspects within the company. Keep in mind, they still have games that are coming out besides Star Wars Outlaws, which is what it was. A lot of people say that game was a garbage game. I don't think it was a garbage game, but it definitely didn't do the financial stuff that it needed to do to really justify its existence, especially to Ubisoft execs. But they're getting ready to release an Assassin's Creed game that they have to push back because of the controversy they stepped in, which I blame a lot of this stuff and a lot of different things that are now starting to have consequences for many different companies is a lot of the statements and the way that people have been acting on social media in various different sectors. It's not just media. It's not just execs. It's not just developers, indie or AAA. It's, again, a lot of these different factors that are all happening around the same time or around the same vicinity that are starting to cause this recipe for disaster in a couple different cases. It's not to the point where I feel like the industry is experiencing a crash. Thank God. I think there's still companies that are still thriving, or at least being sustainable enough to keep doing what they do best, which is great. It was what we want, in any part of the industry. But there are definitely companies and definitely sectors of the industry that are starting to feel a lot of the effects, especially post-COVID, post-pandemic. There's, again, all that fallout on top of everything else. There's a lot of different things that companies have to deal with. And unfortunately, that's just the reality of the business. That's the reality of the industry. And as much as we or anybody else on social media might feel a type of way about that, we might get in our feelings about it, it is what it is. And unfortunately, hopefully going into 2025, things start to be a little bit more on the uptick and change for the better. If, again, very different than the game releases that we've been getting this year.
Right. Do you think, going off what you just said, because I think that's those are all very excellent points, just about like a lot of how companies have been struggling and whatnot. Do you think it's more likely we will see companies begin to shift to sort of like medium priced titles? Because I think that if you look at the indie game sector over the last, I don't know, like 5 years, I mean, a lot of that indie game has to be eating into like the big AAA market, because now people are like, well, if I can go play a Animal Well, right? Or I can go play a Balatro that's only $20 or $10 and have a ton of fun with it. Do you think companies may at some point start to be like, hey, maybe it's more financially beneficial for us to get back to also incorporating smaller titles as well? Like one of my favorite games ever, Ubisoft, actually, is like Child of Light. And that was a medium priced game when it came out.
You want me to tell you why that isn't the case? And my answer would be no, is because a lot of those examples are the exceptions, not the norm and not the rule. The main unfortunate truth is that games are getting more expensive to develop, especially AAA games. They are not cheap. I mean, look at Spider-Man 2 that came out last year or not that long ago. That game was almost $300 million just to put together with everything. That's the marketing, that's the development, that's all the stuff that you need to do to make a AAA release, especially for Sony first party. Other games have various different budgets. I'm pretty sure Ubisoft is paying a very big price tag to put out Assassin's Creed Shadows. And despite all the crazy like controversy and everything else, it's still an expensive game to put out there, or let alone develop and actually get into store shelves or on the actual digital stores and all that stuff. That's the same thing universally throughout the industry. It's expensive to put together and develop a game. And that goes all the way down to indie developers. There's so many indie developed games that don't make it or you never really hear about because of the financial hardship it is to put that stuff together. There are games and definitely standouts like Animal Well. There was definitely another one recently that I played called Iron Meat. There was also Retro Realms that came out that was not even about a week or so ago. It was based on the Ash versus the Evil Dead and John Carpenter's
Right.
Halloween IPs that was released by Way Forward and Boss Team Games. You know, indie teams that are not AAA, but like they have a pedigree. They have a reputation of putting out really solid, you know, action games or 2D games or, you know, like I guess you could say like bit inspired games for various different reasons. But there are definitely those outliers out there. However, that's not the norm. And unfortunately, there are definitely only going to be special cases where those games succeed and get at least the marketing and the word of mouth around for them to sustain themselves, let alone be successful. But it's always going to be a financial hardship no matter the size of the company. And I think now we're going to see, we have been seeing lately over the last few years and probably going into 2025 and 2026, that a lot more bigger companies, because of what they did during the pandemic and what a lot of different companies did to compensate for what was happening then, are going to see those after effects. So they're going to see those, setbacks for a lot of different reasons. Again, Bungie experienced this. Microsoft experienced this earlier this year or a couple months ago. They laid off a lot of people. Those were all hires during the pandemic. And again, same thing happens for other companies. The only one you really don't hear a lot about with stealing with stuff like that is Nintendo. And I think it's because they have a lot of people that are experienced enough to make the sacrifices and the moves and the adjustments to really compensate, to make sure it doesn't get that bad. They've gone through stuff with themselves in the past. Again, look at the Wii U era after the success of the Wii. Like, it was very different than how everybody was hyped up for the Wii console. So again, there's ebbs and flows in the industry, but I think we've been seeing a lot of it because of what happened with the pandemic and how people were buying games and treating games back then. And then now the market is kind of going back to what it used to be prior to that. So a lot of companies are changing up stuff, but it's always going to be expensive to put games together and it's never going to change.
Yeah, you know, and speaking of Nintendo, one of the things I think I've started thinking about them more, because I've, you know, said this many times, I'm not only just a Nintendo diehard, I'm a Nintendo investor, Nintendo shareholder.
Yeah, we all love Nintendo.
You know, certainly am a little more favorable to them. I just like them.
Yeah, they're
So
great.
I kind of feel like they are almost in a way going the Rockstar route, where they're saying, yeah, if our game takes longer, and that, you know, they said that recently. They said, you know, like I think it was Miyamoto quote who said, hey, a good game will always be good. And they had another quote too, where they said, if we basically, what we want to do is, like, every 5 years, we want to have a Breath of the Wild style game. And we understand that takes, you know, like, time to have that type of a game.
Yeah, they've always been like that though. Like they have
Yeah.
the reputation and they have the pedigree to do something like that. Not every company is like that.
Right.
And lucky for them, again, they're the oldest video game company in our industry. Straight up,
Right.
they're over 100 years old. Like
Yeah.
they've been a rock, literally a foundational rock in this industry for generations at this point, or a generation or two at this point.
Right.
The point is though, is that they at least have the breathing room to do stuff like that, where for a lot of their bigger franchises like Mario, like Zelda, I would even argue Metroid at this point, because we're about to get Metroid Prime 4, you know, at some point next year, next year that's coming out, you know, and other like different franchises that they put underneath their belt and in their portfolio, where they could do something like that and everybody's just okay with it because they have an expectation and level of quality that you're probably going to get more than likely from a Nintendo game. It's not the same with a lot of other companies out there, because I think there's a lot more misses with companies, because I think they're more willing to kind of stick to deadlines or push things forward a little bit more so and rush out there to play to the trends and play to a lot of the different things that change in the industry. But I've always a company for better or worse. And in some cases, it's definitely for the better, because people, again, you have those generations of people that will constantly go back and buy Nintendo games because they know, like, this is the Nintendo seal of quality. You know, this is the type of stuff you're going to get from a Nintendo console, from a Switch game, from a Wii U game, from a Game Boy game, etc. Like that. You can't really say that, or other people can't really say that about some of the other companies like Microsoft, which went through a whole title wave and like craziness this year. But even the same thing with PlayStation. Even though I like PlayStation a lot, I think they have definitely a higher level of quality than most other people, besides maybe Nintendo when it comes to their big first party titles. But again, it's the Nintendo's definitely, again, the exception as opposed to the norm.
Yeah. And I think Nintendo, like you said, they have a lot of breathing room. You know, one of the things I talked about with, like, you know, Switch 2, we're gearing up for it. We know it's going to be coming at some point.
Yeah, the next Nintendo console. By the way, got
Yeah.
teased by Platonic yesterday.
No, it's getting, yeah, exactly. I saw that as well. It's getting, yeah, because they're just like and Nintendo, because they
There's like, oh, we know. I got the little eyes there. We saw that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, at this point, it's now there's rumors that the Switch may not be a first quarter launch and perhaps later in the year launch. But speaking of, I want to talk about Nintendo as well, and we'll circle around to the other companies as well. But with Nintendo, you know, one of the things I sort of going back, and I made a TikTok about this like a couple weeks ago, is that it's kind of crazy to me, and I knew this would be the case, and I even went back and found like an old video of me talking about what I thought would happen, and it totally has happened. Is for a long time Nintendo was developing for 2 platforms. There was always the handheld platform and the, you know, the home console platform. So the minute they switched to the Switch, now all of those development studios are developing for 1 platform as opposed to 2. Like when you go and you look at the Switch's library and you look at the big third-party games they did not get, like, I mean, they didn't get like the current Assassin's Creed, no Call of Duty, no Madden. They did get NBA 2K.
No Tekken.
Right. Tekken. They didn't get
Street Fighter.
They didn't get Street Fighter 5 or 6. I mean, Capcom has been very good with Nintendo. I mean, they ported almost all the Resident Evil.
Yeah, they release games on there, but they just haven't got like Street Fighter 6 and stuff.
Right. But obviously, you know, like they didn't get Elden Ring or any of those things. Like, is it shocking to you that it's the best selling? It will be the best selling console ever without all of those.
I don't think it's shocking to me, because again, the crowd that goes for those big games that they did not get on their platform is very different than what the ones that are on PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series consoles. The main reason being is because a lot of the audience that they kind of like play to, or at least that they cater to, are the ones that are die hard for them already for a long time. And you know that crowd, regardless of how those games are, they're going to buy those first party Nintendo games. You're not really getting a Nintendo console for third party titles. They've always been like that, even all the way back to the N64, and even I would argue the Super Nintendo to an extent. Again, different time frame, different era of gaming, because third parties were a little bit much more important back on Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo era, as opposed to what we got now. Over time, I feel like that's changed in various ways. Like, third parties are still important on Nintendo platforms, but you don't get a Nintendo Switch to play Mortal Kombat 1 or Mortal Kombat 11. Right. You're not getting a Switch to play, you know, any sort of random Konami game. Like, even though I love Metal Gear Solid, you know, they have the collection on the Switch now. You're not getting that console to play that. You're getting that console to play Mario Odyssey, to play Smash Brothers, to play Mario Kart, to play Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom. That's why they're successful like that, because that audience, they know that audience is always going to get that stuff for those experiences, and everything else is kind of like icing on the cake for it. What is going to happen though is that because of the guts inside of the Switch and the next one coming around, the next console, whatever it's going to be called, because I don't think it's going to be called the Switch 2. They're probably going to change the name. The point is though, that next console is going to be a little bit more stronger with the type of processing power and the things it could do as a handheld home console hybrid. So you're going to see a lot of those other games they did not get within this generation jump over to that one as well. You're going to see a lot of ports. You'll see Tekken. You'll see Street Fighter. You'll more than likely see a lot of, you'll see Call of Duty.
The Resident Evil remakes.
You're going to get all that stuff eventually at some point. And again, a lot of it was probably due to technical reasons, which is usually the case. It was the same thing with the Wii during the time of the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360. But again, things are really changing for the industry, and they've been changing for quite a while. And I feel like Nintendo, as stubborn as they are, they at least are business minded enough to know, like, okay, like we could at least benefit from getting some of these games on our platform with the type of platform and the type of ecosystem that we could foster. We could still be ourselves, but still get all this down the line as well.
Yeah, you know, what's interesting is actually early on, if a game was on PlayStation or a game was on Switch, I was buying it on Switch because I was like, oh, I could take it with me. Of course, now we have things like the Steam Deck and the ROG Ally, but there were a lot of games that I was like, well, I'll buy it on Switch, knowing that it was a lesser.
It might be inferior in some ways, like Witcher 3. Witcher 3, I was surprised. That's like black magic that they got that to run on the Switch. Or Doom. You know, playing Doom Eternal on the Switch like that.
The big one for me was Dragon Quest.
Like
Yeah,
it's wild to see, like, and it's great. It definitely is visually inferior compared to the other consoles, like, again, for
right.
obvious
Yeah,
reasons.
and early
But
on, it wasn't as bad. Like,
yeah,
early yeah, and of course, now it's
it's
certainly a
just that,
stretch.
again, you're getting that console for a specific type of experience, and you're not caring about the third party consoles. But that's
Yeah.
going to change eventually at some point.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think when Switch 2 comes out, I think one of the other things that people aren't, really thinking about or realizing, and, this is a conversation I feel like I hear a lot on TikTok is like the fact that a lot of people, Sony has released those numbers talking about they're still like half the generation is still playing PS4, and the Xbox Series S as well. Has that been holding the Series X and perhaps even this entire generation back, because some developers are now sort of shoehorned into having to develop almost for that as their base and then
Sometimes, yeah.
expand it. So
Sometimes,
if
yeah.
the Switch 2 is even like the rumors are it's even going to have a little more RAM than the series. So if it's even somewhat close to the Series S, maybe like we'll say like a PS4 Pro, right? But obviously with a few more
Yeah.
things with like faster SSD and RAM and stuff like that to kind of keep it a little more like in between, say, of like the PS4 and the Series S. If that's the case, then a lot of the new games that come out might not even look that bad or whatever on Switch 2, because that's going to be now sort of the new base of this generation.
The other thing to keep in mind too is that if it's easier, than before to put for developers, again, third party developers, to bring their games over and to port them over, and it's like less work than anything else. Because one of the big problems during the PS3 era, if you remember, why
Yeah.
a lot of games went over to the 360 from like PC or anywhere else, was that the cell processor in the PS3 was a real pain in the butt to develop for, or to even to port games over. It was a big
Right.
annoyance for a lot of devs, and they hated that. So when the PS4 came out, they were relieved because now everybody could kind of put their games on there without much of a problem, even though it was still work. I
Right.
feel like with this, it's still the same thing. And I think that a lot of third party devs and just devs in general, anybody is going to want to develop for whatever this next Nintendo console is, if it's still comparable to what we got, more closer to modern consoles, to what we have as current releases, or at least within the range of it. Because if Activision, if they wanted to, and now they're owned by Microsoft and stuff, if they could get Call of Duty everywhere, they'll do it.
Yeah.
It's just the way
They're
of
going to.
business. They don't care. A lot of people get too caught up on the kind of like locking off the ecosystems or the console wars, like conversations about it, which is really stupid, because a lot of those people seem to forget, like, look, these companies are businesses and they want to be able to maximize their output and maximize their revenue that they generate. And by having their games everywhere, if it's not first party and it's not second party, like owned and stuff, then they want to have everything out there. Rockstar would be the same way. Like, imagine GTA running on the next Nintendo console, which
It's gonna.
there's been GTA games on Nintendo platforms. Like, that's nothing new. But, the question is now, does this next Nintendo platform get GTA 6? That's the
I
type
think
of conversations that people are going to have.
I think it's gonna, because I think
Mm.
it's gonna be, well, for starters, the big rumor is that it's about roughly as powerful as the Steam Deck, right?
Yeah, which would
It's
make
gonna be,
sense because that
yeah,
we've
and that
known for
there's
like the
that
last
now.
year what they're actually putting into this thing. Like, 'cause
Yeah.
remember, a lot of the different factories that have been putting together whatever this new console is,
Oh yeah.
they've been reported on by Bloomberg. Like, you could go out there and read
Oh
like the
yeah.
whole spec list of this thing without the actual name that Nintendo just hasn't told us yet. So I could totally believe that.
Yeah, I mean that's the other thing too, is the Steam Deck and the ROG Ally and the Legion Go have also totally transformed the way I think a lot of people look at like PC releases and are even specking out things, because now it's not just, oh hey, the Switch was existing out there sort of on its own. Now you have all these other handhelds, and it
You got
seems
options.
like, and everybody, and the MSI Claw, and it seems like that's going to be a much bigger thing in this next generation, because more
Yeah, and
people
you
are
know what's
going to
funny
be
about
doing
that?
that.
This is different than when the Game Boy or when
Right.
the DS was around, or the 3DS, because back then the only real competitor for the Game Boy obviously was the Sega was it
Game Gear.
Game Gear, and then besides that, when you get towards the DS or the 3DS era, was only the
PSP.
PS Vita and the PSP. And
Yeah.
they weren't really like real competitors when you think about it, because they had their own problems they had to deal with. With this one is a little bit different, because now you got like PC companies that are developing something like this. That's not just Microsoft, it's not just PlayStation, that
Right.
it's a little bit much more open-ended and a different type of tech that is definitely offering a different competitive, like, option for consumers to
Yeah.
actually dive
Yeah,
into.
I mean, I have my ROG Ally right here, and yeah, I mean, I love it. as a
Yeah.
device, I mean,
My my
it's
brother,
it's
he has
awesome.
a what is it? He has a Steam Deck, and he
Steam
likes
Deck.
it because again, connected to a Steam ID or Steam account,
Mhm.
be able to have those same games that you're going to play on PC anyway because you have Steam like
Yeah.
that. It's another way to play, and it's another option, which is good.
Yeah, because I mean, yeah, the processor inside in the Ally, I have the I don't have the Ally X, I have the launch Z1 Extreme is essentially just an AMD, what is it, 8840U, which is the same
Mhm.
chip that's inside a ton of laptops
Mhm.
and a ton, of other
Which is
things.
great.
Which is
It's
yeah,
right there.
exactly. So now it's like, well, it's all still x86, platform like on PC. So I feel like actually maybe that might be the new base that companies are looking at because they're saying, well, that if we make that our sort of PC base requirement, it's going to work on PlayStation, it's going to work on Xbox, it'll
And if
probably
it's
work on
cheap to
Switch
put
too.
together, keep in mind
Yeah.
that's another
Yeah.
thing that these companies got to think of because between the chip shortage stuff that happened during the pandemic and obviously getting all the right resources to put all these consoles together like that, that's a very big point of contention because then the more better stuff you put into these things, the more expensive it's going to be, and then that's going to impact your bottom line for how many people are going to buy this thing. That was a big conversation that was going on when the Steam Deck first came out, and I think even around the time when the ROG Ally first came out, it's
Yeah.
like they had different tiers for this thing, but like was it really worth diving into the more expensive tier in order to get like all the stuff, the better battery life, the better guts inside, and all that stuff?
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure they've had conversations about that for whatever this new Nintendo console is, and they're going to find a nice medium in there. They're going to find a nice compromise to not only get the best that they could possibly get without breaking the bank on putting this thing
Yeah.
together.
Yeah, because I will say, even though I love my ROG Ally, the Ally X, the new one, has a
Mm.
way better battery, and like this
Yeah,
thing is light, but the battery life on it is literally, I mean, it's
you got to get more like the
it,
more than 5 hours, in
oh
some
no,
cases.
on the ROG Ally, you get an hour.
An hour. Look at that.
Yeah,
Like you can't do
like
that. You got to plug that thing because you're not playing
yeah,
there just for an hour.
I bought the XG Mobile. It's like proprietary eGPU. That's with like the 4091. So it's now just a glorified desktop. But yeah, but I mean this like that's what I love about the Switch, is like I mean aesthetically and everything. I love the Switch. I think it's like a great,
It's a great
like solid,
console.
it's a solid little device. It's about to be the best selling console ever, which
Well,
is
I think it's
crazy.
still probably going to still be the PS2 because there's probably other numbers in there that they got to factor in and other stuff that they got to look over time and stuff. But
Yeah.
at least it's still good. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. It's certainly number two now, but yeah, I've looked at the projections and stuff, and I think that actually might be one of the things Nintendo's waiting for to release the Switch 2. Because if they can, if when the Switch passes the PlayStation 2, then they can come out and say this is a successor to the greatest selling video console
maybe, but
ever.
you'd
Yeah.
be surprised. I think they're going to have them in succession. I mean, parallel to each other. They're going to be
Oh, they will
simultaneously
be.
around because they're
Yeah.
still going to have that for a while. But they're
Yeah.
also, I think that whatever this next console is going to be backwards compatible because they'd be
Oh,
stupid
yeah,
not
it's gonna
to
be.
not to
Yeah.
allow that because of
100%.
how much they've invested into that platform, and let
Yeah.
alone how much people have bought into
Yeah,
it.
Nintendo has always been pretty good with backwards compatibility. I mean, there's only like
Not always. The one time that they didn't do it
the
well,
64 didn't.
well, the 64, well, because I mean that was a different type of jump, but also from the Wii, I mean the Wii U era. The GameCube, it's a Wii, GameCube, it's a Wii U era. Because at one point they got rid of the backwards compatibility. I remember
Yeah,
that was
yeah,
a big problem for a lot of people.
the early most of the all well, my Wii, all the first generation Wii's were backwards compatible to GameCube, and then yeah, like
I think you had to
later.
get one certain SKU for the Wii U in order to have it. It was like the black Wii U that you had to get.
Oh, really? Yeah,
Yeah, there was one
I
SKU. I
had the
remember.
black one, and
It's,
it
again,
was
people, this was
backwards
years ago,
compatible.
but like there was one SKU of that Wii U
That didn't have it.
to have is backwards. A big what to do that people were complaining about. It's like why get rid of that? That was another
Yeah.
thing too with the PlayStation 3. That was a
Oh,
big
yeah.
deal.
Yeah, when they got rid of when
Mhm.
they got rid of it. Yeah. And I think, early on, I think that was I mean, Microsoft shot themselves in the foot. I mean, on literally, I mean, I think they're still trying to recover
Well,
from
they were the ones that
the
figured it out.
Xbox One. Yeah.
For the Xbox One and the Xbox Series consoles, they figured out how to really kind of make backwards compatibility work
Yeah.
by putting the old disc. They're the only ones that figured it out, really.
I know. Actually, Xbox oddly is the best in backwards compatibility. I mean,
Mhm.
I've actually thought about going and buying a Series X just because I have like an enormous 360 collection.
Yeah, just
Just
use it.
like, yeah, just pop it in. Yeah. So, yeah, interesting. Cool. Okay. Well, you did talk a little bit about like the console wars a little bit, and yeah, I want to ask you.
Mhm.
I like Xbox. Do you think Xbox is going to just become Microsoft Game Pass?
No, No, I don't think
You think we'll
that
still
there's
see
been a scare
Xboxes?
with that for the last couple of months, especially this year about it because it's been a mess. Let's be honest, their messaging, the way that they've talked with people, Microsoft, I'm talking about the
Right.
Xbox brand has been horrible. You know, I remember watching Xbox like exclusive podcasts, people that just really talk Xbox stuff, losing their mind because of like some of the stuff that was coming out. Obviously, that was going on with Sarah Bond, with Phil Spencer, and all the other people, Aaron Greenberg, and all those people over there and everything else when they were doing their podcast because there was a real legit scare. It's like, you know, some of these big Microsoft exclusives are going to other platforms, you know, and investing a lot in Game Pass, which Game Pass loses money. Game Pass
Yeah.
really doesn't make money in a lot of stuff. This is why it was such a big deal with today with Call of Duty Black Ops 6 coming out. That's on Game Pass because now you're telling people you could pay like $15 or $20 for the month and then you get everything with Call of Duty. It takes away the premium nature of that, or at least the a la carte nature of that, even though it's still available. But I don't think they're ever just going to be Game Pass. I think they know and they're smart enough to know that people still want to buy games in some ways. I think that Game Pass is a great value for the customer, but it isn't the end all be all solution because there's other options around that kind of tinker with stuff. But I think also there's some cons to Game Pass that besides the games getting removed and such that don't always benefit the customer in the best of ways, depending on what franchise and what types of games you're talking about. But I think that they're smart enough before it even gets to like a real dire point that they'll keep things going for how people want them to be, like to be able to buy games, be able to have releases that are put in stores like GameStop. That's really why Game Pass even really exists. Same thing with PlayStation Plus Premium and a lot of the digital stores is because a lot of those companies wanted to get away from having that second person there, like the actual
Right.
GameStop, the Best Buys, the Targets, to remove that and just have it direct to consumer. So it's a big back and forth with that type of stuff.
Yeah. I don't know necessarily that Xbox is going to cease to exist. I will say sometimes I do think like
I think
man,
it's hyperbole,
right.
honestly.
I do think like Microsoft could literally just like end the console war. Although it's obvious that like that the console war like ideology like doesn't even exist anymore. Like it's not
It's really just a
it's
fan thing. Like, you gotta
yeah.
keep in mind, a lot
I
of
think
this goes
it
all the way
certainly
back to the
was.
16-bit
Yeah,
era.
it certainly was at points in time. But like, I mean, Microsoft could end it by just being like, all right, well, I mean, they could have bullied the FTC into just letting them, let Call of
No,
Duty
I
and
think they got hard checked by the
I don't
FTC.
know,
I mean, when they got
man. I
under
don't know.
oath, and then you
You
heard
think
for the
about it. You
first
think
time under oath, you heard that Xbox Game Pass loses money and all this. And then you had what's his name from what is it from
Phil Spencer.
Activision, the former CEO. I can't remember his
Oh
name right now.
yeah.
Bobby Kotick. When Bobby
Yeah.
Kotick was on there like that, and he was under was it oath, and he was talking about I don't know why they're doing stuff like this. Everybody was like, oh, like it's that serious.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that, I don't know. I think they could have bullied it because you look at all the politicians, I go to Quiver Quantitative all the time where you can track politician stock purchases and stuff like that. And, all of them are constantly loading up on shares of Microsoft. So I don't know.
That's
I feel like,
Microsoft Tech. That's not Xbox brand though. That's the
but
Microsoft
it's,
like computer brand.
yeah, but I mean, it's the company. You're still buying stock in the entire company, and that's certainly I think that's certainly a piece of the puzzle. So I feel like maybe they could have, which is why when people were talking about like Ubisoft potentially getting bought out, like if somebody was to buy it, I don't know that Microsoft would even be allowed to buy it.
Well, I don't know if it's Microsoft be able to buy it because obviously like they're already under scrutiny
They
from the
just
FTC. But like people were worried about like Embracer Group or Tencent like buying
right
up a
for
Ubisoft.
sure,
That's an entirely different
for sure.
problem, an entirely different conversation with it. But I don't think that they would ever stop making games like that. I don't think they're going to stop making consoles. They made that very clear. I think that was a legit scare at some point because when you start talking about Microsoft first parties going onto other platforms, like the idea of Halo going onto the PlayStation, that was a very real thing.
Yeah.
Like a very real thing that people were worried about and talking about. And when you saw games like oh my god, there was 4 or so games that were going to other platforms. I think that
They said
Hi-Fi Rush was one of them.
Starfield is supposed to be one of it.
Starfield was rumored at one point, and
Rumored,
same thing with Indiana Jones. That was also rumored. But then there was also those 3 other games that got announced.
Hi-Fi Rush. And I can't remember what the other
I think
ones
Grounded, I think it was Grounded was one of them, or something like that. There was a couple that they announced, but this was like months ago. That when they had that whole like Xbox podcast episode where they were talking about it, because people were legit concerned because why at that point that question was why should I invest in an Xbox ecosystem when these games that technically are originally supposed to be just on this platform are now going to my PlayStation or not going on to the Nintendo Switch? Right. Like, why should I go buy a brand new console? Or why should I stay with this platform when I got this over here that's coming over here anyway? And a lot of people were concerned also with the new Blade game, That was another one. And then even Indiana Jones, when it came out that it was going to be on PlayStation 5 at some point, people were upset about that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Blade, they're not even going to get another movie. They just canned that. I don't think
That's a whole nother
yeah,
mess.
that's another story. But yeah, I've always thought, man, if Microsoft, like, I mean, obviously, look, they make the Surface, so they make they make their own computer, right? I mean, they obviously license Windows out to everybody, but they do make their own computer platform. But man, if they just were like, we're going to put Windows on Xbox, like you can buy a Xbox that can run Windows for like $700, $800, a little bit more, that thing would sell like,
No, I don't think so.
I don't know, man.
Because the idea of a $700, $800 console scares a lot of people. Like we get freaked out as gamers as like a $600 console.
Yeah, but
like,
it's
so small that people would actually buy that.
No, it's a computer that's also an Xbox.
Yeah, but that you're still going to talk to people that are like, look, this is a game console. I'm not paying $700, $800 for a game console. They'll market it like a Windows PC.
Yeah, they have to market it as a computer first.
But it's still, I don't think it would work like that, honestly.
I don't know, man. I think it could do. I think it could do extreme. I think it could do extreme.
Because then at that point you're going to be talking to a different audience, and you're trying to talk to a gaming.
Because then it literally becomes a sort of like a one device.
Because then how do you even speak to them? Because at that point they'd be like, okay, this is a PC. I don't want a PC. I want a console. Like I want an Xbox like console. Yeah, it gets very muddy.
Yeah, I think if you could just take that, you take your Xbox game, you put it into your Xbox Home, whatever you want to call it, and it's just like a dedicated thing. Oh man,
Xbox Home, imagine.
that might be, who knows? Yeah, I mean,
we should be like, yo, why you gotta steal our ideas?
Yeah,
our name.
Yeah. Okay. Well, okay. Let's talk a little bit more about Ubisoft. Do you think it's probably going to be that they go private? Do you think it's going to be somebody steps in and buys them, like one of their like big investors, like Tencent, or do you think perhaps another video game company is going to step in and try to buy them?
No, I don't think another company is going to buy them like one of the big console manufacturers. I don't think that's going to happen.
Or a big third party.
There's a very real possibility that one of these other, like, again, Embracer or Tencent could possibly try to buy more shares, but that's been the struggle back and forth for a lot of places. There's been like hostile takeover things with them that they've been fighting off. I think that eventually they are going to go private. I have a strong feeling that's the case because they've expressed a desire to do that. That was over the last couple of weeks, if not a little bit longer, where that was another conversation that they had that they were talking about with the president, taking them off like the stock exchange and stuff like that. I think that's a very real possibility. I think that they've been experiencing a lot of turbulence because of the releases of Star Wars Outlaws, with Prince of Persia, with the Assassin's Creed brand, Skull and Bones. They still haven't even put out Beyond Good and Evil 2 yet. That's a whole nother problem. Like, there's a lot of things going on over there, but I think eventually, maybe post Assassin's Creed Shadows release, we might see them make some big changes in order to kind of stabilize the ship a little bit over there. But it's going to be tough. It's going to be very, very tough for them.
I think a lot of it hinges on Assassin's Creed Shadows. Like if that game is great and it does well, okay, then maybe they'll see.
I think they shot themselves in the foot with it, though. I think that not so much because a lot of the big controversy was some of the stuff that came up with Japan because of Yasuke, with that character and stuff. Right. I think that a lot of that problem came about because of the way that both developers and other people on social media were talking and the way that they were talking to the audience specifically. I think that a lot of people have this perception that this character is put into a game simply for a checklist or simply because they not virtue signal, but they want to actually appear a certain way to a certain crowd. And that's not the crowd necessarily just for Assassin's Creed, let alone gamers that are really going to make a game like Assassin's Creed Shadows successful. I think also they inadvertently stepped into that mind with Japan and that entire controversial conversation, which I think they wanted no part of because I thought they probably thought to themselves that they were going to be doing a good thing that's going to get them a lot of attention in the United States. And I don't think they expected that type of attention that they got from the Japan region. So again, it's weird because it's a Japanese-centric historical time period and Japanese cultural game. So you would expect like maybe they would look at it or go about it a certain way, but who knows at this point? I feel like, there's a lot of weird stuff going on with that. And hopefully that game is good. I've seen the gameplay. I watched all the Ubisoft Forward stuff. I watched all the Summer Games Fest trailer stuff and everything else. And it looks good, but they have to find a better way to talk to people and they have to find a better way to present this game to avoid all this stuff because it's just not doing them any favors.
Yeah, I agree. It's already, like you said, it's already got a lot of controversy around it. And then, I think like literally the future of the company hinges on,
I don't know if I would go that far though.
I don't know, man.
I think it's going to do damage if it did bad, of course.
Well, if you look at Ubisoft's stock price since COVID. I mean, it's just declined and declined and declined. I think their market cap, I just looked at the other day.
Yeah, but
It's
that's for a lot of reasons, though. I think that's for a lot of reasons that, again, not just Assassin's Creed. That's also due to Skull and Bones doing the way that it
oh,
did.
it's due
Stuff
to a lot of things.
with
Yeah.
a lot of different things behind the scenes with them that I feel like, again, dealing with stuff in Europe and France and
Right.
such. It's a weird time for this company, and
Yeah.
I
I
hope
guess
that Shadows does well. I really do.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I do too. I mean, I hope they can, sort of stay together and be their own company because that's ultimately best for the market is when everybody has, there's more competition and everything. I guess my sort of worry or thought process about it is if their stock continues to decline, it's basically going to become a 1 billion or perhaps even sub $1 billion market cap company. And at that point, I think it's just too valuable just for the intellectual properties alone for somebody to not step in and buy them for whatever reason. I mean, if you
This is
tell
why I think it'll go private before it gets to that point. Honestly, I think it
yeah,
will.
it just they just have to have enough. They just have to have the capital to
Yeah,
step
just
in
to
and do that.
just to get out to get off the market like that and just go
Yeah,
private. And I think that they'll be fine. I to me that seems like the most likely scenario. Like I
yeah,
think that if it does get to a point where they do get bought by like a Tencent or an Embrace, I think it's Embracer Group is specifically the group that
yeah.
was talked about like buying them and stuff. There was another company like about a year or so ago, and I can't remember the name of it, that they were trying to have a hostile takeover of it. But I think specifically Embracer Group is the one that everybody's worried about because remember they bought a bunch of like
Right.
franchises, a bunch of like companies and stuff to
Oh
get the
yeah,
IPs, and then they sold them off. It's like they're
yeah.
connected to stuff in China that people are worried about. It's a lot of stuff. A lot of
Yeah, I
things that
think
are
I think
outside of games.
Embracer was Embracer one of the companies that a lot of people thought was WWE was going to get bought out by before
No, not bought
TKO.
out by, but they were going to work with.
They were
That
going
they
to
were going
work
to.
with.
It
Yeah,
was
that's
either
right. Yeah,
Tencent or Embracer Group.
yeah, I think it was Embracer.
But
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 I
a
guess
lot of it is because of their connections to China and the
right
CCP. That's
for sure.
really why a lot of people were worried about it and stuff.
Yeah, I guess for me, what I'm saying ultimately is I think you could still because the shareholders still have to agree to take it private. Is I don't know, man. I mean, for around $1 billion to $2 billion, like even if you're paying a little bit more for it, I could see I could see somebody even like maybe like a Disney or an Amazon or somebody going
No,
and be like,
I
hey,
don't think that would ever
we could
happen.
look at
I
all,
don't
but
think.
look at all the intellectual properties you could acquire for like $2 billion. Like that's kind of rare
But
in
keep in mind also the
today's
company, what are they going to do with some of those IPs? Like when you buy a Ubisoft, like just for the sake of some company bought
right.
Ubisoft, right? You get Assassin's Creed, you get Rayman, you get Far Cry, you get
Watch Dogs,
Tom Clancy stuff, which is like Splinter Cell and Rainbow Six and stuff. There's some
Division.
companies that are just never going to be able to do anything with most of these IPs. That really is not going to fit with them. Now if a game company, possibly yes, but even then, I feel like some of the
Yeah.
IPs, the franchises, like again, Splinter Cell, what is it? Even like Skull and Bones, or even Beyond Good and Evil, even Rayman, I would argue, are not as valuable as they once were like years ago. And I
Oh
feel
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
even the
Assassin's
market,
Creed is the Assassin's Creed
even the mind share
is
amongst
the cream of the
people, even
crop.
for a game like a new Rayman and stuff, or the rabbits, because the rabbits really, I would argue, is the more valuable thing of that IP than Rayman himself is at the current moment, anyway, because of everything that happened within the Wii generation and all the other stuff.
Right.
But I feel like again, there's just not a lot of companies that are willing to spend money to pick up a lot of those franchises and then have to spend money afterwards to develop games for them. I just don't think it's really within. It would actually be beneficial to them.
Yeah, I've looked at a lot of the video game companies' cash on hand, because obviously, and there's honestly not a lot of them that
Because they're all dealing with
have.
their own problems.
They're all dealing because EA has enough to do it, but I don't think EA wants
EA
Ubisoft.
lost the Star Wars license. So I
Yeah,
mean, well, the exclusivity, I should say, because they're still making Star Wars games, but like
right.
they have their own
Yeah.
and then they have to deal with their sports stuff. So
Yeah. Well,
they got
EA
problems.
EA has been rumored that Disney might want to buy EA.
No, I don't think
There was
I don't
rumors
think
about
that's gonna
that.
work either. I
Well,
don't think Disney specifically, I don't think it wants to get into games like that because they had Disney Interactive for a while and they hardly really do anything with it, like at all.
yeah. Well, I think Disney wants it because it's crazy. But a while back, Disney sort of for the first time ever leaked some ESPN numbers, and it looks like ESPN is actually like the majority of that entire company.
Yeah,
Like
because it's
yes,
sports. That's
yeah,
why.
exactly. And so that is why Disney might want in
As far
on
as entertainment, we
EA.
should say as far as
Right.
entertainment is concerned, because really Disney, their stuff comes from theme parks. Like that's their
Right.
thing. But when it comes to like entertainment, like TV stuff, it's sports. Like
Yeah, yeah, their sports
that's the
packages.
biggest thing around for
Yeah,
people.
it's huge. Yeah, so yeah, just interesting. But yeah, I mean, there were rumors a while back. Yeah, the EA itself might get bought out. But
I doubt it, man.
yeah, we'll have to see.
Because when you
Which
really think about companies being bought out, is you so bad that there's no chance for recovery.
right? Yeah, I think that was the case with THQ. it was so bad, and I
Well,
think at
THQ
that
went bankrupt. I think it was. Oh
yeah
no, yeah, no, because now you have THQ Nordic, but I think at one point, like, they were
yeah
really bad.
THQ
Yeah,
basically ceased essentially sort of like
yeah,
ceased to exist, but that was also at a time when it wasn't really at like it's totally different than it is now, where like other video game, like the video game market was, it's like the mid 2000s, so it wasn't like as, or maybe it was like early like tens or
yeah. I
whatever.
think THQ was done around the 2000s, early to mid,
I think it
because
was maybe it's
they,
mid
they
to
were really
late.
big with 16-bit and 64-bit games.
Yeah,
That was the THQ era for
yeah.
most
The
part.
the only thing keeping them alive for a while was like the WWE games.
Yeah, and then they went to 2K.
Yeah,
The license changed hands.
then I went to 2K. But I think at that time too, it was still like a little too early in the video game industry, even though that was really kind of like where like like what you would consider like modern zation of the video game. But it was still too early for like, I think a lot of companies like to go out and try to like steal essentially, or like buy up intellectual properties like you'd see now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I think now, I mean, like that's why it was kind of shocking to me a while back when Sega bought Atlas. And everyone was like, "Who's gonna
Yeah,
buy?
but that
Who's
makes
gonna?"
sense because they're both Japanese companies like that. But it was much
Oh,
more crazier when Microsoft bought companies. Like, remember, they bought like Ninja Theory. They
yeah,
bought a bunch of them up, and they made that a big announcement for Xbox Game Studios. Like, it was like, what the
oh
hell
yeah,
happened here?
yeah. But I remember when Sega bought Atlas, and it felt like it came out of nowhere, and everyone's like, "Whoa!"
Yeah,
Like, yeah, like totally. But now I think that's just like that's the thing. Like for a long time, I kind of thought, man, I was looking at Konami, and I was like, man, maybe Konami will get bought by somebody, but they do their own. They do like
yeah,
those
they're
pachinko
getting
machines.
better now because they've
They
been
are.
doing stuff with their game IPs.
Yeah,
You know,
but they
we're just
literally had
seeing a
they
lot more
literally had
stuff
a span
done.
of like 5 years. They didn't do anything. Like it
Yeah,
was,
they were just they were over there with pachinko machines. They were good,
yeah,
and fitness clubs.
yeah.
They were
It's
all good.
real, yeah, real weird. Okay, all right. Well, let's talk about actually about some games this year, and
Mhm,
I think you and I are both pretty much in agreement on what we think game of the year is going to be. And I think
mhm.
so. Are you still on board with that?
Yeah,
With what
I
you've been
think
saying
right
the
now my top three for the current moment is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which I think is my game of the year so far. I would probably also say Tekken 8 is another one that I would put up there for a lot of people. And I think that the third one, again, no real order, but I think that the one a lot of people would say is possibly a contender for game of the year is Astrobot. And the
Oh
reason
yeah.
being is because Astrobot got a lot of positive attention and a lot of critical and commercial praise from a lot of people. I don't think, as far as like technical prowess and the type of experience and like package that it's offering to consumers, is as good as Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So for me, that's why it's not game of the year like that. But I could totally understand why people would be like, okay, this is one of the best games this year. Definitely, talking about stuff like that. But for me, it's definitely Final Fantasy VII Rebirth.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, and that's one of the things where where I said at the very beginning of this, I was like, man, I feel like this year is maybe down a little bit because it feels like maybe even in the past couple of years with the pandemic and stuff like that,
Mhm.
and certainly going back to the last decade, it felt like we got Final Fantasy VII Rebirth level of games like all the time. And it
Mm.
seems to me like, man, maybe that's just not sort of the case any
I don't think
anymore.
so. Like, again, there's certain games that are like during the times when they came out that definitely achieved that level of quality where it's like, okay, no, this right here is a game of the year game. Like,
Right.
you felt like that. The year that happened was the year that it was God of War. No, was it?
2017.
Yeah,
That's
well, God of War
2018.
Ragnarok and other games came out, but the year that Final Fantasy VII Remake came out, Ghost of Tsushima and The Last of Us Part 2. Like, that was a hell of a year for talking
Right.
about game of the year, because and also Doom Eternal came out that year. There was a lot of big games to be talking about, to be like, okay, like this is a real game of the year conversation to have, because there's a lot of good stuff that was just dropping all over the place. This year, not so much. I feel like we've had great games that are definitely games and highlights of the year, but not that game of the year quality. Like, I don't think any of the games that have come out, like some people have talked about Helldivers 2 being in that conversation, which I disagree
I think
with.
it was, but
It was
it's
hyped
not
up to be,
anymore.
but it just didn't end up being like that. And the same thing, Astrobot, like I just said before, I think it's a great game, but I don't know if it's necessarily in that game of the year conversation. A lot of other people have probably said like a variety of different games all over the place. Street Fighter 6, because of how good that was. It's fine to have these
I think
conversations.
Street Fighter 6, I think, was last year.
No, Street Fighter 6 was this year because it came out just before the summer, like around the same time, because it literally dropped right after Tekken 8, I believe it was. It was after Tekken and right after Helldivers, I believe.
No, Street Fighter 6 was last year.
Was it last year?
Yeah.
Okay,
Street
so
Fighter
wait,
6 was
I'm
last
trying
year.
to think, because like Tekken 8
So
came out
we got the
this year.
Marvel vs. Capcom collection this year.
Okay, yeah, we got
That
that.
was a couple
Yeah,
weeks ago. Or that
yeah.
was that was a couple weeks ago.
That
No,
was recent. But like I'm talking about earlier this year, like that March, April, May
yeah,
time
yeah,
frame
yeah.
is what I'm talking about. Because I know Tekken 8 came out, and then Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth came out around the same
Mhm.
time frame. What
Dragon's
was it? And then
Dogma came
Helldivers
out.
dropped. There was like one after the other, like every like couple weeks, earlier in the year. But for me, I feel like Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth has just done so many good things in general, not just for continuing that legacy of that franchise and that beloved game for a lot of people, but the level of quality visually and just gameplay wise, I thought was up there. Definitely for one of the biggest highlights, I think, this year that just
Yeah.
really like was that good to be in
Yeah,
the
I
game of the year
mean,
conversation.
just to speak about that game on its own, like I to me, it might be my favorite Final Fantasy ever, and I might argue it might be the best Final Fantasy ever because
I know about that, but it's definitely
I
up there
mean,
as far as
man,
quality.
I went into it being like, okay, this is gonna be fun because and then really like the difference between it and the remake, just being so much more open, being able to actually run around and do everything and
Yeah, more
explore like
space.
the really like meat and potatoes of the story of that game, and being able to do the gold
Yeah.
saucer and having all the mini games and everything. It's sort of like what I imagined Final Fantasy 7 being when I was a kid, like this is what I
Mhm.
like imagined Final Fantasy 7
Yeah,
being.
like
Yeah, and getting to actually play that. I mean, I yeah, I mean, it's
it's
certainly
good.
yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. It's certainly my game of the year, but yeah, it might even be my like Final Fantasy. But
Some
like
people feel
favorite.
like that, and I could understand that. Personally, for me, I don't think it's the best Final Fantasy game ever made. It's definitely up there. Like you can't deny like just how good it is, and how good and easy it is to get into for a lot of people. You could die. Personally, I've told this to people, and some people say I'm not like accurate with this, but I do believe you could jump into that game and not know nothing about Final Fantasy 7 and really kind of get caught up and feel like you're getting in there and really enjoying the experience for what it is, and then be on board for whatever this next third game is going to be because they're already doing a third game. We know
Oh yeah,
that
yeah, for
that
sure.
we're going to get that. But
I don't know.
this is definitely the
They
highlight,
said they're only gonna do 3. And I don't
which
know
makes
how.
sense because there's only 3 discs for Final Fantasy
I
VII.
know,
But
but
even if they extend it out, like there's enough stuff that they could do. They could start bringing in compilation of Final Fantasy VII stuff into there. So like Dirge of Cerberus, obviously they did Crisis Core stuff a little bit. You could get all the
do you think they'll be able to finish it in one more game? Because where this ends is like the end of disc. Is it the end of disc
like there's still
1?
more places to go from like disc 2 technically before you get into disc 3.
Yeah,
Like
I mean, I think there's it's either a lot of stuff is getting cut or a lot of stuff is getting streamlined in order to kind of
I think
and
that
to
stuff is getting
crank.
streamlined, and I think you're
Yeah,
also going to get more stuff from the other compilation of FF7 stuff because keep in mind the next game we're going to be able to control Vincent more than
yeah,
likely. In the next
yeah,
game, so I think you're going to be able to control the whole gang at some
right,
point. But I think that it's still going to be big, kind of like what Rebirth was. But I think that you still get that conclusion, but there's going to be even more. Like if they wanted
right.
to, I'm
Well, the
pretty sure Square
story
Enix could
is
extend it.
yeah. Without going into crazy spoilers for people who haven't played it, the story is sort of like parallel to Final
Yeah, it's like
Fantasy 7. It's its
yeah,
own kind of thing. It's kind of like it's kind of like the J.J. Abrams Star Trek,
it's an
where like
interesting way to like
to do
do
it.
a reboot or a remake with while respecting and having reverence for what originally came, which I think
Yeah,
is clever. And I think it was the right way to do it because again, everybody gets to have their cake and eat it too, which I think is
right.
great.
Yeah, yeah, I think it really is sort of like the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies, where it's like,
Yeah.
okay, it exists in parallel
But now let's go
to
crazy over here. Like
yeah, but we can do whatever we
literally.
want. But it like the other stuff, it still exists. We're not like rebooting the franchise. I think I think it's a really good thing. So
Mhm.
what Final Fantasy game would you say is best?
I think that for a top three, when you have to talk about like the best Final Fantasy games ever, you have to talk 4. I think that that's a very, very big game. Final Fantasy 6 for a lot of people, I would say as well. I think Final Fantasy 7, the original, is also one in there because that's the most popular Final
Hmm.
Fantasy game for very legit reasons, especially in the time that it came out. But I would even throw in there Final Fantasy 10, to have it again,
Yeah,
top 5. When you're talking about those games, I think that all those Final Fantasy games would obviously not really counting in all the historical context of many of the other games I didn't mention. I feel like those are the ones that really resonated with a lot of people. Some people would even say Final Fantasy 16 was one of those things as far as iterating and changing up what the series is, like it's always done every single successive release. But those at least would be the games that I think are in the conversation of the best one. And it's different for everybody because
yeah.
it's very hard to just choose one.
What's your favorite Final Fantasy?
My personal favorite would probably be 4.
4.
Would probably be 4, and because 4 complete, I think that's a great story. It's a classic gameplay wise as far as a Final Fantasy game with the 16-bit graphics or 8-bit 16-bit graphics. But I think it's also has the hallmarks of a classic Final Fantasy that could also really translate to a lot of modern audiences.
Yeah.
That's really good. It's really interesting to go.
And 4 has like a
Cecil.
DS sequel, right, or
It
something.
says Cecil, and it has the after. It's the main story is on a guy named Cecil, but then you have the after years, which is like the sequel to it. But then you
Right.
also got interlude, which is right in between. They have a
Right.
release of it called the Complete Edition that has everything into
Oh,
one
okay.
thing.
Okay.
Mhm.
I have played 4, but I haven't played any of the extended content or some of the other
It's
stuff.
they have it, I think, in the re-releases that came out, the Pixel
The
remasters.
Pixel remasters.
I'm pretty
Okay.
sure they have all that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. My personal favorite is 9. I think just
I always felt 9 was overhyped. Real talk, like because I played and reviewed 9 on my own YouTube channel. Like I
Yeah.
went into it expecting greatness in it, and it's like that game. As much as I appreciate the characters and also the combat, going back to classic combat instead of what we got in 8, I just don't like the world of that game.
Oh,
I
really?
just don't care for it.
I like 9 because it was a return to like medieval
Mhm.
franchises, and that it's also a tribute to the series. Like there's tons of
Yeah.
tiny little Easter eggs and everything's in there. And it was also I actually played 9. I played 9 to completion first
Mhm.
on PlayStation.
Okay.
So I had like rented 7 and played through a good portion of it, but I didn't. I played and finished 9 and then went back and was able to play
Mhm.
like 7 and 8. The first Final Fantasy I actually ever played was Mystic Quest on the Super
Oh
Nintendo.
yeah.
So, but I
Diet
think,
Final Fantasy.
yeah, which is like a real, out there Final Fantasy. And then Tactics is also up there for me as well.
That's another one that some people say is one of the best, but again, that's a spin-off that I feel like it does its own thing.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think if I were to recommend a Final Fantasy for somebody to play first, I would say 10.
Yeah, 10 to me is the best one for newer players
Because it's
got
sort of
everything you want, like crushingly difficult compared to some of the other Final Fantasy games.
Yeah, I think it's also the perfect blend because it has voice acting, and so it certainly feels a little more modern. And also I love the fact that you can switch between all your characters. So
Yeah,
your entire party matters
Mhm.
until the end, in which case they all sort of go through the sphere grid with everybody. And then
I mean, at that point, like you kind of like you're
Yeah.
sticking with like a core 3 at that point. But
Right.
I love it also. Keep in mind, 10, I think, has some of the best presentation in the series. You got the best
100%.
music, or some of the best music. You got some of the best visuals. Again, even on a PlayStation 2, like the world of Spira, and the just like seeing a lot of that water themes, like visuals and stuff, and the dances with Yuna and everything. I think that's fantastic.
It's got that and I've seen people talking about this now, and I never really thought about it, but it's totally true. It has that early 2000s beach vibe that like everything had.
Yeah, because this game came out 2000, 2001. Like
that
was
have
that
you
was
seen
a
that?
big
Have you
deal.
seen people talking about that? Like the early 2000s?
Well, I've seen people talk about this game where they've mentioned like the memes and stuff. Like they
no. People are I've been seeing it on Reddit. More and more people are talking about how the early 2000s, like the entire aesthetic across all media was beach vibes, and it's totally true. Like if you go look at like movies and everything, it's like
Blue Crush. There you go. That's your
like
movie.
All tropical stuff, and I'm like, that is entirely I don't
That's
know
funny.
what the deal was, but
that was probably a thing.
Yeah, it was definitely
we didn't
a thing in
realize
marketing.
it.
Yeah, like other big, like Kingdom Hearts, you start on a beach. I mean, there's
that's right, because of Destiny Island.
It's not just games, but it extends to like movies and stuff like that. So yeah, okay. So for me, I'll tell you some of my big games of this year, probably my like sort of top 5. I am totally agreeing with you. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, I think, is the best game of the year. I think it's going to win Game of the Year. I mean, unless something comes out and absolutely just blows it out of the water. To me, the only legit challenger I see to it, and I think this just comes down to sometimes like award companies will allow DLC to compete for
Elden Ring,
and sometimes they won't.
Bad.
Yeah, I think it just comes down to it, but I certainly think it'll be a nominee for it. I still think Helldivers think Helldivers 1, I really loved Helldivers 2, but I was a hardcore Helldivers 1 fan. I was not expecting it to blow up nearly as big as it did. I was totally shocked at how big Helldivers 2 got, and then they sort of shot themselves. Well, Sony shot them in the foot.
Yeah,
really.
Really.
It was
really
sort of more so the case. They didn't really shoot themselves in the foot. But I did have a ton of fun with Helldivers. And then like indie game, man. Balatro is like life
Yeah, I
for
think
me.
Balattro's
I don't.
overhyped,
It's
honestly.
no, dude.
I
Balatro's
think that game is
so good.
overhyped.
No, did you finally play it?
I played a little bit of it. I have to dive more into it and stuff. But like the thing is, like I look at Balatro. I even look at a game like Animal Well.
It's not gonna win game of
Like
the year. Don't get me wrong.
like like to me, that's not a game of the year contender. Like
No, no, no.
I
It's
think
not
it's
gonna
a
be a game of
fun
the year
game for
contender.
some
Yeah.
people, but it's not going to be something that resonates with everybody.
No, 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 no. Yeah, it's not. It's not gonna be the game of the year. It's not gonna be a game of the year contender. But just in terms of sort of like games I've really, really enjoyed this year, it's certainly up there for me. I have an addiction. It just came out on mobile, even. So now
Yeah,
I have
I
it
have it on
literally on my phone.
iOS right now.
I have it on my phone, my tablet, PlayStation, Switch, my MacBook. It's a problem. It's and the Reddit group is like an emotional support group of people
Balatro's
talking
anonymous.
about pretty much it's like your Balatro addiction. And yeah, I mean, Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, I'm having an absolute blast with. It's so much fun. It's not going to be a game of the year contender. Most fighting, it would take like a
It
really
could
really
definitely get
insane.
nominated for like best like action game, but I
Yeah,
don't even see that winning. Like there's other games that I feel like are probably going to get like there are, we're talking winners like legit
yeah.
winners. I could see Helldivers 2 winning best action, even though I don't agree with it. I could
Or
totally
best
see
multi.
that happening.
It might win best
Or best
multiplayer.
multiplayer, yeah, I could totally
Yeah,
see that happening. But even then, like I think even a stronger argument could be made for a game like Tekken 8. Tekken 8 was
yeah,
actually really impactful for a lot of people when it came out. As far
yeah.
as this year is concerned. But as far as like or again, Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth, that's actually good. But even then, I feel like that will win probably best RPG, if not again, game of the year.
Yeah, I think, and then really the only other game I think that's going to get nominated, or at least I can look at right now and I can say that game. I mean, I agree with you. I think Astrobot will get nominated for
Yeah,
game of the year. I don't know if it's going to win.
that
I
game could
think,
get best family too. Real
yeah,
talk.
yeah. I think Dragon's Dogma is going to get nominated. I don't know if it's going to win, but I think it'll get
I don't know
nominated.
because a lot of people were very lukewarm on that. Like I saw some people hyped up about it and talked about it for a bit, but I don't think that got like really high scores.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we'll have to see. I kind of think it might get nominated, but other than that, man, there's really not a lot of games that I'm like, man, that is sort of
Like there's
like
still games that come out though. Like now we just got Call of Duty, and then we're gonna get
right,
Indiana Jones at the end of this year, which I don't think is gonna be counted towards the game of the year
right,
conversation because it's
because it's too
after
late.
it's already too late by the time that drops and stuff. I think also Metaphor might get talked about at some point. The Metaphor got a lot of positive
Yeah,
vibes,
I've
but I
been
don't
hearing a
think it's
lot of
gonna
people
win.
say metaphor. I've been hearing a
That
lot
could
of
be
people
best
say
RPG.
metaphor. Yeah, yeah. I don't think Zelda is gonna get.
Yeah, I don't
It'll
think
get nominated for like best
Zelda's gonna
family
win
game.
best Nintendo.
Honestly,
Like
it's actually like sort of my least favorite Zelda game I think I've ever
really?
played. Yeah, I think it's just like it's cool, and I'm glad we can finally play as Zelda. Like that aspect of it
Mhm.
is great. But you're just I feel like I'm in the menu system the entire game.
Hmm.
Like I'm just like, oh my god.
It's
And
not
I
as
love,
exciting as like Link Between Worlds or something.
yeah, I think it's just, I mean, it is. It's just it's a really slow game because
Hmm.
you're kind of in stuff. I mean, being able to explore, like, it's in some ways it's like the best 2D Zelda game because it's the most you can explore in any of that sort of classic
Really?
Zelda.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, for what it is, and I think like I'm glad you get to play Zelda. It's a new take and experience on it. It's basically they said, how can we take Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, I should say. How can we take Tears of the Kingdom and put it into classic Zelda? And that's essentially what
Yeah.
they did.
There's pretty much
It,
somebody said something similar to that one time.
yeah, and it looks great
Makes
and
sense.
everything, but I just feel the game it's just too slow for me, and I don't
Mm.
know. I'm like a diehard. I mean, where am I? Let me go this way.
Yeah, I can see
Diehard
this
Zelda,
field.
yeah, Zelda fan, and yeah, I think it's probably one of my least favorite
Mm.
Zelda games. Just did
I
not
noticed there wasn't a lot of people that were really hyped to like compared to like Tears of the Kingdom. They were not
right.
hyped up for Echoes of Wisdom.
Yeah, I think it sort of felt like a smaller game and stuff, and it also
Mm.
came completely out of nowhere, like
That's true.
and it also isn't the Zelda game that people wanted. Like
At the time, yeah.
yeah, what everyone has been asking for is, hey, we want that Wind Waker port on
You want Wind Waker or
Switch.
Ocarina of Time vibe, like instead of
Right,
not a Breath of the Wild type of thing, which is what they thought what Zelda was going to be like moving
right.
forward. But I think a lot of people have different tastes with it, and I don't think everybody resonated as much with that Tears of the Kingdom type of approach to it. And even with this one, because people love classic Zelda, but I think that people want to go back to that like Ocarina of Time, Twilight Princess type of era.
Yeah, I agree, and yeah, Tears of the Kingdom actually, I have sort of mixed feelings on it. I
Same.
sometimes I'm like Tears of the Kingdom is better than Breath of the Wild, and sometimes I'm like, Breath of the Wild is better. But I
I
mean,
always felt those two games were overhyped. And the thing is, I don't
Breath of
think
the
there's anything
Wild,
wrong with them. I feel like
yeah,
they're both overhyped in some ways.
yeah, Breath of the Wild, it is to me is like a top 10 game ever made. I mean, I absolutely loved every minute of that game, and I have easily over like 1,000 hours
Oh, wow.
in that game. I bought it on Wii U because I didn't have a Switch when the Switch first came out.
And
I
then you got
then
on Switch later.
bought it again on Switch. Oh yeah, and literally, yeah, I have so many hours in
Hmm.
that game. But I think maybe that's one of the things when Tears of the Kingdom came out is
It was just more of the same.
yeah, but it's different enough that you can do. I think it's going to be one of those things where whichever one you play first is going to be the one that you appreciate or like more. But it's just sort of like when I having played Breath of the Wild first and then playing Tears of the Kingdom, it was kind of like, well, I've already been here and done that.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can do a lot more cool stuff. Like you can craft and do all that stuff. And a lot of the other aspects of the game are definitely better. Like the story is way better in Tears of the Kingdom than Breath of the Wild. Like there's more towns, there's way more to interact with and everything.
Yeah.
But it's just I think it was literally just because I'd played so much Breath of the Wild that when I got to Tears of the Kingdom, I was like, all right, kind of been here and done that. So
Like, I'm good.
yeah, last year for me, that was my favorite Nintendo game was Super Mario Wonder. Actually,
Yeah, a lot of people like that.
it
A lot
was
of people thought
amazing.
it was
Yeah,
pretty good.
yeah, absolutely loved Super Mario Wonder. So, all right. So taking aside the games we think are going to be game of the year, what would you say are just your top 3 favorite games, new games that you have played this year?
Of this year?
So personal favorites, yeah.
Of this year,
Yeah.
specifically.
Yeah.
Okay, so Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth, Tekken 8. If I had to choose a third, so tough.
And it could be like an old compilation. It could be just
Oh,
release
it doesn't
this year.
necessarily have to be new like that. So
Yeah, just release this year.
I mean, again, that's still pretty tough because there's a lot of good ones that I could say. Like, even if you throw in compilations in there, there's still some pretty good ones. Like the Castlevania Dominus collection, I thought was pretty good. I thought that obviously the Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting collection is pretty awesome because that's a thing
so
we've
good.
been asking for
Yeah.
years. For something like that with Marvel 2 specifically, and we got more than we bargained for, which is great.
Right.
Oh man, like and even I would even say to an extent Star Wars Outlaws, but even though I was a little bit disappointed in it because I feel like that game could have been something even greater than what it ended up becoming and stuff outside of just the bugs and stuff. But like at least it was still at least in the right direction and doing something for Star Wars games specifically that hadn't been done before in this type of capacity. So at least that's where my head would be at with all those games.
Yeah. I think those are all that's a great list. And I think I agree with you. I think Star Wars Outlaws, like in a way it's kind of disappointing because it definitely felt like it was going to be bigger and better and everything. Had they sort of just marketed it as a little bit more of like what it is, I think the perception of that game would be totally different.
You know what I think it is too? There's a couple things that was wrong with Star Wars Outlaws. I'm talking about the release of Star Wars Outlaws, not the game itself. The release of it and the conversations around it, I think, was tainted from the very beginning because of a lot of people were complaining that this game wasn't something that was never intended to be. Like one of the biggest criticisms of Outlaws was that you couldn't make a custom character. And it's like, that was never the intent. Nobody ever brought that up. That was just the audience that put that out there to hold against the game, which I thought was wrong and wasn't fair because they didn't get that same thing with Cal Kestis in the Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor games, which I think was, again, massively unfair. I think also Ubisoft did themselves no favors, and really massive games or massive entertainment did themselves no favors when they were talking about how they wanted to just focus on the underworld stuff, which is fine, but they wanted to go so opposite of what Star Wars and an intricate part of Star Wars is, which is also including the Force and the Jedi, which we get something like that in the game, but obviously it's like a kind of like a tacked on thing. I feel like when you're trying to market a game or trying to market a project to an audience that has such a legacy like Star Wars, you can't just start like downplaying one aspect in order to favor something that you want to do at that moment. You have to have reverence for all of it. And I feel like, that's the problem with all Star Wars projects where you see a lot of different shows or even other projects not doing as well because they keep getting caught up on that conversation or that type of conversation with the audience. And I felt with Outlaws, it really did them no favors. And then obviously the bugs and glitches and the whole thing with the cloud save stuff really didn't help them. Like that was something they needed to figure that out from day
Do you
one.
think it's pricing hurt it? Because that was a huge
well, the
topic of
pricing gave it a bad
conversation.
perception. Keep in mind, there was options to play Star Wars Outlaws. So I got
For
the
sure.
Ultimate Edition, but I didn't pay no $100. I got it off Ubisoft Plus, and I played
Right.
it on PC and on Xbox. There's an options to do that. The problem is that, you know, because of the restrictions with Ubisoft Plus, it wasn't available on PlayStation. People didn't have options to go get it. So coming out and saying you have $100 version for a game out there like that, people just don't like the way that sounds. And the perception
Right.
of it is just wrong, even though you could still buy it at regular retail price, which is $70. But people aren't trying to hear that. They only thing they hear is $100 game. And it's like, really, this is what you're going to charge me for this? Like that, that's the conversation within. And for better or worse, it might not be fair, but that is the conversation. And when you had that launch on PlayStation 5, the way that they went about it, telling everybody they had to delete their saves and everything else, that just killed it for a lot of people.
Yeah. Do you think that some of the larger narrative around Star Wars in general also caused?
Yes, I think part of it did. Keep in mind, you know, this is coming out at a time when not only we're at a very weird spot with the franchise as a whole. We had just came off the Acolyte, you know, which was probably the worst thing to be released.
You and I,
that really damaged the brand. We should talk about that when we get a sec, but that damaged the brand in such a severe way that it affects everything Star Wars, not just Disney Plus. But that affected it, you know, the perception of Lucasfilm and the way that also people at Lucasfilm talk to the audience, I think was very damaging. That affected also the release of Star Wars Outlaws. The only things that haven't really been affected by it is the Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor games, the Respawn games, and some of the other stuff involving the original trilogy, you know, like other stuff, like other projects and things like that. But I think also there was a problem with Star Wars Outlaws that was wasted potential, because keep in mind, this was a game set between Empire and Jedi, or Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, for anybody who doesn't know. Nothing for Shadows of the Empire. I wrote a whole editorial and did videos about this. I'm like, you got stuff in Star Wars canon right now that could work for this as DLC. The Black Sun Syndicate, Prince Shizor, Dash Rendar, like,
I know
it's right there for you, son. Like,
I'm one of the biggest. My buddy. When I used to have a Star Wars podcast and the Star Wars channel, my buddy Ezra, he runs a Star Wars podcast that I go on from time to time now, and I'm one of the biggest proponents
of Shadows of the Empire coming to canon, right?
About Shadow,
I've been saying that for years.
Technically, it is canon. So
here's the thing, because I have to follow this.
Shadows isn't, but Dash Rendar is now officially. He is officially canon. There's a
little thing in Outlaws that talks about a smuggler ship. I found that day one.
Oh, well, yeah. So his ship is in when the George Lucas did the 1999 remaster.
Oh yeah, the special edition. Yeah, the Outriders.
Yeah, the Outriders in there, and then also I have it over there somewhere.
There's a thing where Han Solo mentions him, right?
It's like the most random book ever. It is it is a solo movie, like
spin-off book, right?
Companion book. Yeah, it's not even like it's not a novel or anything. It's like almost like a kid's thing. And basically what it is it's like if you went to this real quick, if you went to this like outpost, it's like a smuggler's outpost, like sort of like scribbled notebook or something.
Oh, I have that.
I have it over here too. It's like it's I know
what you're talking about. The Smuggler's Handbook.
Yes,
Smuggler's Handbook. I have that.
It's like Tales of
it's
Vandor,
gray, right?
Or something. No, you're talking about a different book. I know which one you're talking about. No, this is something different. I'll pull it up but anyway, in that thing, Dash Rendar like makes a tiny little like comment about Han Solo, and so like that's like but it's a canon book, and so it is. Like,
here's the thing about
where he exists right now is Dash Rendar exists in.
Here is the thing about this that's unfortunate: the books, the novels, all that stuff does not matter. And the reason why that doesn't matter is because recently with The Mandalorian season 3, one of the things that they did in there with Luke Skywalker having Yoda's lightsaber in there contradicts what happens in the comic books that are supposed to be canon. It completely makes them irrelevant. And at that point, as a fan, that shows me that everything that I follow outside of just the shows and the movies are completely irrelevant. Okay, yeah, now I know what you're talking about. Okay, this is different than what I was talking about before.
I know which book.
Tales of Vandor or Tales from Vandor.
Yeah.
But none of the stuff in the books really matters because everything is completely just overshadowed or not taken into account by the people making these other live action or animated projects, which is a shame because there's a lot of stuff obviously from the expanded universe, things like Shadows of the Empire, and obviously the books that they've been releasing over the last couple of years that are now completely irrelevant. And it sucks as a Star Wars fan to say that because You know, if I'm someone that's putting all this money into checking out all this stuff and you're just never going to use it or you're going to contradict it, what's the point of that?
Right. Yeah, I saw your post. I think it was on YouTube today, talking about how, or was it today or yesterday, talking about like, oh, Kylo Ren's going to be in some comic. Like, who cares?
Oh yeah, the
Yeah,
new comic, yeah. That
yeah,
that was irrelevant because it's like, look, the Vader comics and all that other stuff that they've done, completely irrelevant because not only are the stories not that great, let's be honest here, even the people that like the comics could definitely admit that like some of these stories are just kind of throwaway stories that try to change stuff up about canon that just doesn't
it
make any
doesn't matter.
sense. A lot of things. The point is like, look, it's cool to have if you want that novelty of it, but they really don't matter.
Yeah, no, yeah, yeah, 100%. And that's how I think that's how like the like we were talking a little this whole we whole sort of spun this whole thing into like the perception of Star Wars as a brand probably
Mhm.
hurt Star Wars Outlaws, and
Yeah,
I
big time.
yeah, and yeah, I agree because I mean that franchise has just I mean literally since the sequels I feel like it's just been going downhill
Lucasfilm got to
outside
get
of
their house in order. That's the main
yeah
thing. I've always said they got to stop talking down to
they
the
just
audience. They got to
they,
stop being mean to the audience.
they just said today that the Ray movie's gone
No. The Ray movie still happened. And the problem was is that their writer was it
right
Stephen
or left,
Knight.
but the
He actually
2026
he was the
deadline
writer
might not
for it.
happen.
He
Yeah,
left the project, and the problem is like this is the same playbook that we've seen with Rogue Squadron, with
with
many of the
everything.
other different projects, just leaving. And it's like
Yeah,
this movie
Th-
doesn't feel like it's going to be like now we are going to get the Mandalorian and Grogu. Like that's going to
right.
be a thing. They already shot that. That's in post production now. But don't announce projects if you don't think like you're actually going to fully commit to them, or you're not going to be keeping things on track and have a plan to actually release them to in theaters, which is what Star Wars needs right now.
Yeah. So games wise, you know, we have
Mhm.
been thankfully been getting a lot of ports of all of the old games with
Yeah,
the GOAT coming back here soon. Jedi Power Battles
I don't know
getting
about
its
no goat, but it was nice.
just getting
Don't even play like that.
getting its thing with updated content, which is crazy
Yeah.
that they're like sort of expanding it. My guess is you're gonna be able to play with all the characters. You have to unlock Darth Maul in it, so you know maybe
Oh
you
yeah,
can
you're gonna be
play
able
him.
to play with everything. They're getting new characters that you couldn't play with in the original version, which is like the
Yeah,
droids and a few other things in there, which is
and I
pretty
think
neat. But
and Mace Windu's lightsaber thing's gonna be purple in it.
yeah, they fixed up his lightsaber finally. They
Yeah,
should have
yeah,
kept it in there just for the novelty. That would have been
yeah.
funny.
Just
But
yeah.
what the bigger thing with this edition and the remaster of the game, and what you've been seeing with a lot of the Star Wars remasters that have been coming from Aspire, with a few exceptions, of course, is that there's a lot of quality of life changes. And this games like this, like Jedi Power Battles, games like Star Wars Bounty Hunter, you know, really benefit from this because you get better controls, you get better visuals or cleaned up visuals, better
Mhm.
lighting, more extras. You know, with Star Wars Bounty Hunter, I thought that was the best version of Bounty Hunter because it controlled much better. It took certain things that were just really annoying and really inconvenient about the original release and tweaked them to make them so much better. And then
Yeah.
gave you a little bit of extra content. You could play as a Boba Fett skin in a Jango Fett game, which is awesome.
Yeah, I think Aspire's been doing a great job with I know the Battlefront 2 Classic had like some launch
Yeah.
issues, but they sort of cleaned that
They
up and
fixed up things afterwards, but just they when it really mattered, they needed to have that all figured out at launch, and they didn't expect how big it was going to be with the multiplayer stuff. But even then, they needed to fix up a lot of stuff. So that one was on them.
yeah, they must be selling well because obviously Disney's like saying, "Hey, go port all of these old games, you know, over and over,"
There's
and
a couple of
they're
big ones they haven't done yet that I've been on their butt about, especially Aspire about doing, which was Rogue Squadron, the Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith game,
Yep,
and Shadows of the Empire. But
yeah,
they need a Rogue Squadron collection. They need all three of those games remastered.
yeah, 100, yeah, 100% agree. Because I mean, all a lot outside of those, a lot of the big games, you can Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2 have been sort of ported to everything at this point. I played them on
The only thing
Switch.
they're not on is PlayStation, which is weird because those games should have been on PlayStation 5 or PSN.
Oh, they're not.
Yeah, no, yeah. But I think it has to do with whatever deal or something about those games because originally they were Xbox exclusives for years, for a very long time
Mm,
until not only they were eventually, you know, obviously on PC, but then they got brought over to the Switch. But they're not on PlayStation consoles for some reason, which is crazy because
yeah,
all the ports that Aspire's released for Star Wars games are on everything.
yeah. Huh, that's weird.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, so okay, so Star Wars. Let's talk like big AAA Star Wars games. Do you
Yeah,
think with Star Wars Outlaws taking sort of a hit, we know we're going to be getting a new Jedi Fallen Order, you know,
sequel. Yeah,
Survivor
Cal
sequel,
Kestis 3.
right? Yeah, Cal Kestis 3, which those games have been freaking phenomenal, and I think Lego Star Wars, the Skywalker Saga was amazing, and I
Yeah,
think
that's
it's
a great, best
such
Lego game in my opinion.
yeah, I would agree. Best Lego game, not even
Yeah,
best
best Lego game, exactly.
yeah, because for a long time I felt like Lego Marvel was the best. The first
Mm.
Lego Marvel was like the best.
Oh, better than Lego Batman 2. I thought Lego Batman 2 was the was peak. for
Yeah,
that
and
group.
I'm way more into DC and way more into Batman, but I think
Mm,
that I thought Lego Marvel was amazing.
okay.
But yeah, Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga is great. New engine, it's obviously I can't wait to see them do more stuff with that when we get it. But do you think Outlaws is going to hurt for at least a while, like big other AAA Star Wars games we could see?
No, because a couple reasons. Number one, we're obviously getting the Jedi Survivor sequel, which is going to be big. I
Mhm.
think that's the last game of that trilogy. They're making it into a trilogy, which is great. Smartest decision Respawn made because people love Cal Kestis, and to see an end to that and maybe possibly have him appear in live
Mhm.
action, which by the way, I talked about that was an actual thing. He was going to appear in live action
They
in
need to
some
have
point.
that. Yeah.
Okay, that's one thing, right? But also keep in mind, we're getting Star Wars Eclipse that's still in development from Quantic Dream. That's still a thing that's happening. And that's going to obviously take place in the High Republic. And it's a different era of Star Wars that
I think it's
hopefully,
gonna be a
because it's
long time
Quantic
before we see
Dream,
that game though.
yeah, it's going to be a while, but it's Quantic Dream. When they release games like Beyond Two Human, yeah, Detroit Become Human, I'm sorry, Beyond Two Souls and Heavy
Right.
Rain, they have a pedigree.
Two Human was a game for the Xbox that
Yeah,
was
but
dog
but
trash. Yeah,
beyond, yeah,
yeah.
but Detroit Become
I
Human.
know,
Like,
what you mean. Yeah, yeah.
but keep in mind too, also Respawn has other games coming out. They have an RTS Star Wars game that's coming out, which is going to be different, which I'm afraid might be also on mobile devices, which might speak to the
Yeah.
quality of what that game might be. But if it's anything along the lines of like Empire War, I'm down for it. And I think that
Yeah.
people want a nice, good RTS game for Star Wars, which would be pretty sweet.
Yeah.
But
Empire War is in my top 5 Star Wars games of all
it's a really good one.
time. It's
It's
so
definitely
good.
up there in the conversation.
Yeah.
I've ranked when I ranked it on the PC games thing when I did the tier list stuff. It was S tier because
Didn't
that's
you just did a video about that, didn't you? You just did like
what I did was the last day or two, I put a compilation of all the Star Wars tier list games that I put in like over 4 hours. But I'm
yeah,
talking about
I was like, yeah, I was like, yeah,
every Star
didn't
Wars
you just
game ever
drop like a
made.
4-hour video?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it's every Star Wars game ever made. It's literally every single one on every platform ever released. So I'm probably the only person that I know of that's done that so far,
Yeah.
as far as I could think of. But the main reason why I bring that up is because like that was a phenomenal game. But also keep in mind, there's a lot of variety of Star Wars games that we're getting now, which is great because before, during the exclusivity deal with EA, we weren't getting that. We were just getting Battlefront 2, which I'm hoping, fingers crossed, this opens up the door for other companies to at least attempt different things. We could get back to that golden era of Star Wars games around like 96, 97 till about 2008, 2009, where there was a
We're getting
lot of
everything.
different genres being played with the IP. So we're getting more games. I think that Outlaws was one of those times where it's like it had the potential for greatness and it kind of fell flat, but there's still other games for the franchise and for the IP that I think are really going to do well. And we've even lost some Star Wars games along the way, which is a shame. We were going to get a Mandalorian game from Respawn. It was going to be the first person shooter that was going to be inspired by the Jedi Knight games, which I still can't believe they canceled because people were hyped up about that. I remember reporting on it, was it a year or two ago when it was actually becoming a thing on LinkedIn and stuff. But I think Star Wars games are just going to be fine. AAA Star Wars games are still going to be a thing. Again, very expensive, so it's still going to be limited to a few companies that probably still do this. But I think when these other games start dropping and stuff, we're going to see some good stuff. I think we're going to be okay.
In the meantime, we just have to stick with Star Wars Hunters.
Oh God, hell no! That game was garbage. I've said for years that game was going to be garbage, and look what happened.
I know, it's so bizarre to me that is just like hey, we're gonna make a Star Wars like MOBA or Overwatch, team shooter or whatever, hero shooter, and then they're just like, oh, but we're gonna use all original characters.
Yeah, real stupid idea.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe that was part of sort of the licensing agreement for whatever. They're just
Probably.
like, and they're just like, oh well, it's
also,
too expensive for us to go license. Like
that's probably it. Well, that's probably the big reason why. But I also think too, they were just so caught up on trying to differentiate themselves from everything else. Because remember, there's also another mobile game for Star Wars, Galaxy of Heroes, that's been around. That's been a thing for a lot of people. Even though I don't like it, I don't like mobile games like that. I think they're very predatory in a lot of stuff that they do, including that one. But with Star Wars Hunters, like I like the concept of a hero shooter or something along those lines, but it's just at the wrong time when all these other big hero shooters that are doing things so much better around the same time frame that this game came out. Like nobody's playing Star Wars Hunters because Marvel Rivals is coming out like right around the corner, and it's so much better. And if you're not playing that, you've probably been playing Apex Legends or Overwatch, and you're good. You don't need Hunters.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Which I think, not that we don't have to dive into that whole thing, but I think it's another reason why Concord failed was because it's like there's already other options.
Yeah,
I mean, like, fair. There's all of the character, a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, a lot of the nonsense.
A lot of that certainly I think was an issue for it too. But I think at the end of the day, it was just like because I made videos on it, and I was like, I think it's literally also just the fact that like there's already other options like Overwatch,
Yeah.
and
And
because
keep
I
in
mean
mind,
like I said, like Gundam Evolution failed, and it's like
mm,
Gundam is at least like in the same type of a game, but it's established characters that people
yeah,
already know. Whereas Concord, you're using like brand new characters, and honestly, like outside of like the all the whatever stuff about it, but like the characters were boring. It's literally like, hey, here's a
mm.
robot. It's like, okay, like
Keep in mind the time investment that I was going to say
yeah,
before. The time investment for a lot of these games, like if you're playing multiple games like that, like you're going to have no time to play anything else, or you're just going to lose out on the
yeah,
progress for some of these games. Like to play Concord and to do a lot of these different things while you're also trying to play Marvel Rivals, while you're also trying to play Overwatch 2 or Apex Legends, or God forbid you get into Call of Duty at the same time. It's like
right.
there's not enough time.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I do want to talk about the PS5
Mhm.
Pro a little bit and get your thoughts on that, and
Yeah.
whether we need it, what we like, what do you, I
Nope.
mean, good idea, bad, yeah, just
Bad
yeah,
idea because too damn expensive. Like, I get it. I know what this console's for. It's not for the typical PlayStation gamer or the typical gamer like that. It's not even for the person that doesn't even own a PlayStation 5. It's for the people that love high-end tech, which is a very niche thing. It might do well for what it's trying to accomplish, but I really don't see a lot of people getting that on Christmas. It's just way too expensive. And that's even without games. Keep in mind, and other accessories that you're still going to have to get with this thing, let alone PlayStation Plus, if depending on what tier you get. Like it's a very pricey buy-in for that. I mean, it's cool tech, but it's not necessary tech, and that's what's going to be its undoing.
yeah, and the biggest thing is there's no games for it. Like, I mean,
Oh, it's the games you got now. Like,
right,
I
yeah,
mean, the
the
games that are
benefit,
really going to take advantage of it. Like,
right, and the benefit you're going to get from it, like some of that doesn't exist. Like the PlayStation 4 played 1080p when the PlayStation 4 Pro came out. It was like, hey, at least you could do that 4K, and
mhm,
1440p. It would, I did the Pro did 1440p, I think.
something like
Um,
that. Because there's no real games that are like native 4K like that to output
exactly,
like a TV.
exactly, yeah. So at least you were getting like some level of it. And I was even thinking about this today. I was like, throughout the video game history, right, it was always like that mid-cycle refresh
Mhm.
often was
Nintendo.
like,
Nintendo was notorious for that.
well, yeah, I mean, but a lot of companies did it, but often the mid-cycle refresh was just taking the current system, making it more efficient, and often adding features, right?
Or
Like
make it more compact.
exactly, yeah, yeah, making it smaller and stuff like that. Like the Xbox, like the original Xbox 360 didn't even have HDMI, which is
Yeah, that's
crazy.
right. They had
Like
this
the launch,
proprietary weird thing. I remember that. It
yeah,
was like round and
the
weird.
launch Xbox 360 did not have HDMI, and it got it later. The Xbox 360 Slim might be the best. A lot of times it was adding storage, right?
Mm,
But the 360 Slim, I think might be the best console redesign ever. I think that thing
mm,
was like, looked so cool, and the little disc, and it was awesome.
mm.
But you look at a lot of the other ones. A lot of times it was like, yeah, I mean, making it more efficient, making it better, and like the PS3, like the original PS3 was freaking
Huge.
massive.
It's
Yeah,
like
it was
gargantuan.
massive,
And we
and
got
then you
tiny a little
yeah,
bit.
then you got to the Slim, but it also added storage. So, you look at a lot of those things, and oftentimes it was adding features. And now, like, or we'd also see like a price drop. And we're not
Yeah.
even getting a price
No, we're not
drop
getting
of the
another price shop. You
PlayStation,
kidding
but
me?
because Sony said that the PlayStation 5 is actually, even with half of the like current PlayStation users still on like PlayStation 4, they've said that the PlayStation 5 is still its most profitable console yet.
There's got to be other reasons for that because I
Yeah,
mean, a lot of the people that are normally like into our circles and stuff, we know usually a good time when we're going to upgrade from one console to the other and stuff. I think
yeah,
there's obviously a lot of third world countries with a lot of different people that probably because of either finances or other reasons just
right,
haven't been able to upgrade because they've been dealing with that stuff. So there's probably some fudging of the numbers with that and other things that are coming into play with it. With this one, however, again, it's just the PS5 Pro is such for a niche audience. At least that's how it comes off. Like they're doing the same thing that Apple does with like the new iPhone, like the new iPhone
right,
16 or whatever. It's like nobody wants that right now, or nobody needs it right now. You don't need a PlayStation 5 Pro. You're obviously going to wait for the PS6. That's a different story, different conversation
right,
altogether. You're definitely going to need a new whatever this next Nintendo Switch is going to be off the Switch the console that we have now because that's necessary tech. That's necessary. There's a need to kind of feel like this is the next generation. This is the next leap or the next step for whatever this brand's going to take and stuff. PS5 Pro, I just think is just such a large price tag for a very little gain.
yeah. Because the PlayStation, it's not like the PlayStation 4 or the PlayStation 5 doesn't play in 4K. So it's
Yeah,
just
keep in mind
it's going to
too,
play in better
PSVR
4K.
2 is a thing now. PSVR 2 is going to be able to take advantage of what PS5 Pro has to offer, but you can still play PSVR 2 on your current PlayStation 5. And even
Yeah.
then, that's even if you're into, trying to get into VR with the VR 2 like that.
Yeah.
So even then,
I
it's like,
and even that's even like more of a niche
yeah,
audience, right? And
for
and
real.
yeah, and even then, like most of the people in the VR crowd are like, oh, if you want to get into VR, like, you don't get a PlayStation
Get an
VR. Yeah,
Oculus
yeah, get an
or
Oculus.
Vive, like,
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah, because I had the what is it, the Rift, just the cheap $300
Yeah,
one or
my brother
whatever.
has the Oculus right now, and he swears by it when it comes to VR experiences like that. Like I
Yeah,
even told about the PSVR when it came to like even the PlayStation 4 and stuff. He's like, "No, I'm good." Like,
yeah, yeah. I mean, I had fun with it. I played a lot of Beat Saber. I played the Resident Evil 4 VR, and like that was fun. But I mean, it's still such a niche audience. Like VR is still so far away. I mean, it's
yeah,
way better now,
compared
but
to us, yeah,
compared, yeah, absolutely, yeah, compared to where it was. But I still feel like it's still a long ways off before it's.
big
I mean,
time.
yeah, I mean, Apple was like, "Hey, we're gonna do the Vision Pro." We think a lot of people, and now they're like, "Yeah, that's not happening."
Yeah, right.
Like, well, that was way too expensive.
So much for that.
Yeah, for that. Yeah, but no, I agree with you. The PlayStation 5 Pro is it's just so weird to me because I think the PlayStation 4 Pro, when it came out, there was it made sense, and the Series Xbox One X, I think also, like, it made sense because a lot of it was, hey, you're getting more storage as well as, that scalability, because now a
Yeah,
lot
with
of
this one,
people.
you got to buy the disc drive on top of it. Like,
Yeah,
ridiculous.
yeah, exactly. But it's just like, what games are really going to take advantage of the PlayStation
Like a
5
few first party
Pro?
games, and there you go. That's it.
Yeah, and
And maybe Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth. That's it.
even when you look at it, you're like, is it really like that noticeable of a jump that you're like
Not
getting?
really.
Because like a lot of people, I mean, like, we're still kind of in this wave of, like, a lot of people are still, like, a lot of people don't have 4K TVs. I mean, more and
Mhm.
more people are getting them, and more, that's it's becoming more of the norm. But I mean, I would love to see the data on that, but I would still wager to guess that a lot of people are still just playing on a, 1080p TV.
Probably, yeah. I know I
Yeah.
am.
Yeah, exactly. So are you like, I don't, I have a
I
50.
have a 4K TV in my household, but like the TV that I normally play my games on is not a 4K TV.
Yeah, I game on my mostly on my monitor here, which is 1440p,
Yeah,
and so
like
it's.
most TVs like that are around that range. If it's someone that has like a desktop PC and probably a TV for like their console games and stuff, it's usually within that range. It's probably not 4K.
Yeah, exactly. So really, what are you getting from that PlayStation 5 Pro? And like we talked about earlier, with the Series S still being sort of like the base for this generation, developers really going to be spending the time and money into like making it that much better for a SKU that might, who knows what the sales will even be. I mean,
It really
it,
depends. I mean,
yeah.
it really depends on the developer.
Yeah, I think it's probably, obviously this was in development for a very long time. They said, "Hey, about this time we're going to do the PlayStation," and it's probably been in plan for so long that they like weren't expecting COVID to hit. Like nobody was, and now like the market is in a totally different place. But
Yeah,
they're
it's
like,
like
"Well,
evening
we
itself out.
we're still too far into R&D and everything, and deals with contractors and chip manufacturers
Yeah,
and
the
everything."
chip shortage, that was probably also a big factor with a lot of
Yeah,
stuff
to
like
where
that.
now they're just like, "Well, we still just have to push forward with it."
Mhm.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, cool.
Weird
Okay.
times.
Woo. Yeah. All right, man. Well, hey, I think that's pretty solid for today. We covered a ton of stuff. We'll definitely have to I'll definitely have to have you back on, because I think we could spend hours just
Hours
talking about stuff,
talking.
just talking about Star Wars, man.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah.
trust me, like I already got too much to say on Star Wars. Anybody that follows me and stuff knows that I talk a lot about Star Wars stuff all over the place, with all these
Yeah.
different things.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. All right, man. Well, where can people find you on the internet?
Oh, people can find me everywhere. I am at Jake James Lugo on Twitter, at Jake James Lugo on TikTok. If you like daily uploads, I usually sometimes upload 3-4 times a day, sometimes talking about games, movies, Star Wars, pop culture, TV, all types of stuff. You can also find me on Threads and Blue Sky as well at Jake James Lugo. I'm on YouTube as well at Jake James Lugo, uploading usually a couple times a week, if not weekly, various different gaming related videos and Star Wars stuff that I've been talking about as well. There's a lot of content that's out there for me, but I also write for various different websites. You can find my writing anywhere from the Outer Haven. You can see me over. I just did a Star Wars Shadows of the Empire review on Forever Classic that I wrote a whole review editorial about it, and a bunch of other websites that you guys have probably read in the past. So check it out. Follow me on there, say hello, and just be cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome, man. Awesome, man. All right. Well, hey, I super appreciate you coming on here. Yeah, this was a ton of fun. We will definitely have to do it again.
Definitely.
So, as always, for everyone listening, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.